Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could make it. We'll get started and we'll just wave folks in as we get along. We'll have several topics that'll be going on here, but this will be about the last thing I talk about, but I'm going to send it around now so you have time to play with it. This is one of those virtual fence collars that's made by No Fence is the name of the company. You've probably heard of Vents. And No Fence has both small animal, which this one is, and then has cattle collars as well. So the side panels are solar. As compared to Vents, these are a lithium battery that you can recharge, where the Vents collars, those batteries are one and done types of deals. And then you snap, I'll take this out here. So then you have a charger just like you'd do with your cordless drill and set them in the racks and charge them up. They're supposed to have about 3 to 4 months, and I'm getting a month of charge. So we're learning, and that's going to be a lot of the discussion today. But if you hear that, they've gone live. So I don't have it set for this room to be a pasture, so other than maybe Sandy. And so you can hold the chains, and I'll pass this around. The one thing that I've experienced with these is these actually are staying on, where Vents has had some issues where you take your family and how you go out shed hunting for antlers. That's what you do with Vents collars. But these seem to be staying on. I did break one of these. I had a ewe break this little chain off the end on one. So those are some of those things we're experiencing. If you get on that website, even now, you can look it up. No Fence is the name of the company, and Google that, and then bring it up. But it's made in Norway. Those collars are about $200, and then it's a sliding scale on the cellular, and that's the other deal. They are cellular versus having to put a transponder out in your pasture. Good and bad, and we'll talk about some of that in regards to the cellular. But then I have 100 collars, so my sliding scale that's about a $30 per collar per year subscription, self-subscription for that collar. And so you start doing that math and you say, okay, well, these are warranted for 4 years. Let's hope they live 5 years. That's a $40 a year depreciation rate plus the $30 a year cell service. So you got $70 a year into these things. And you need to think about where you're going to get that value out that was going to pay for them. And so I just want you to have that in the back of your mind as we talk about some of these things. So I recognize a lot of faces in here. So some of you have had to listen to me in class before, but glad you're here. This is where we're at. Always have run cattle and sheep up in that country, and that's not an uncommon thing. In a lot of cases, the mistakes that have been made with grazing, not just in prairie and native and tames, but in cropland on that irrigation project there in Newell's, we overgraze everything, even the cropland. We just take it all. And so those are going to be some of those themes we'll talk about. A little background. I was an ag teacher for 25 years, most of it in Newell, worked as a sheep extension specialist for 10 years and then retired. During that time, always had a ranch, and not a big one, and some irrigated ground. So you go to work, and then you come home, and then you go to your other job. And those of you that have lived that life know that nothing gets done well. There's a lot of sacrifices. For example, a lot of the things that I've done and adopted as far as practices were by accident or because they didn't work. When I moved back and started teaching, I was calving in March, but frozen calves aren't worth anything when you're not there to keep them alive. So I've been late April, May calving for more than 30 years. Wow. You know, that kind of deal is what I've fallen into. Same way with farming, I didn't have time to make the passes across the field to do all that tillage. You just needed that one. And so again, I fell into a lot of these things without any plan. And as we'll talk, we'll run into a lot of unintended consequences from that, which again, because of my lack of management, but observation brought a lot of things to the forefront by accident. So again, I'm telling you, I claim no brilliance here. Anything that's happened is happened because Mother Nature is forgiving and Mother Nature drives the bus. And you just need to keep a lot of that in mind. So we're east of Newell. We're running about 200 animal units and the breakout of cattle and sheep. We've been up and down on both, and depending on where markets are, where weathers are, and where labor is, and what we have for land resources. And then we run about 300 acres of irrigated hay base. A lot of it's flood irrigated. We run 3 pivots now, which again makes a difference in a whole different set of topics. Those pivots can move soil health so much better than flood irrigation. It's unbelievable. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of touch what our ranch goals are as we had to grow into this, because I just feel so foolish on so many things I didn't know, but I was arrogant enough to think I knew what I was doing, but I really didn't know. And life will slap you often enough to make you, if you're paying attention. So at the end of the day, you know, for me, my life focuses around family. And then you look at how the ranch fits into supporting that. But I didn't do that right either. I started the other way, right? Because we're going to build a ranching empire and we're going to do all these things. As well as young men, we have these goals. So you change some of those outlooks. Another thing, again, that I accidentally fell into was because I was working a day job, things had to be simple. And those of you that have spouses at home that travel, the question is, every time you leave, what is going to go wrong? That never goes wrong when you're home. And so how many of you have gotten those phone calls? Horse has broke its leg. The bulls got out and they haven't been out all year. And they got out while you're gone. All those things. So it's caused me to have to leave the ranch with my wife or somebody else to do things that I'm not there, because a lot of times I wasn't there. And even teaching school, and Sarah would know this, 30 nights out of the year I didn't sleep in my own bed just teaching school and traveling with kids. A month's worth of time as a school teacher, and people don't realize that. But you're with everybody else's kids. And so things have got to work. I've tried to keep that mantra, so keep it simple, keep it adaptive. You know, just go with the flow, plan, but be ready to change directions. And then integrate those practices that offer environmental solutions. And some of those things, that's what we'll talk about, and that's how the collars kind of come into play of what we have options to. We run into a lot of issues where we're at. We're heavy clay soils. You can see all this sweet clover. That was probably in 2018 or 19 this picture was taken. We can predict that this coming year, if we have the moisture to support it, we're gonna have sweet clover this tall. And that's an opportunity, but it's also a nuisance. And so adapt. How are we gonna take and make, you know, chicken salad out of that? And those are some of the things we'll talk about. This line, you can see that's a permanent electric fence, and you can see how we're trying to impact one side versus the other. We are making a difference. It's not gonna be 100%, it's not gonna be perfect, but we've got a mixture of animals in there to work that around. I'll try to click through these and then leave some time for Q&As. Much like what was talked on by Glenn, this is fourth cutting alfalfa. And so we're not afraid to graze. those things. Yeah, there's a learning curve. Len talked about it. You're going to kill some animals. So talk to those people that have killed animals before you kill yours and see how to make that work. The lesson here in this picture, I put it up, 2 donkeys. You don't put 2 donkeys in a herd of sheep. They become their own herd and they neglect your sheep. So you always only put 1 donkey in with them so they stick with the flock of sheep. And llamas are the same way. But you can have 1 donkey and 1 llama because they don't talk to each other either, but they'll watch the sheep. This is how we're set up. And we, places here, buildings, and then we've got a midrib of a 2-wire electric fence here. And a lot of years we'll calve over here, and as we calve, we'll dump into this pasture. We lamb in March because that's a window for us to lamb when nothing else is going on, and we get rewarded for our labor because we get an extra lamb out of the deal. Whereas with calves, you get 1 calf. So we run them through the shed. Our cattle, May, June, we're going to be up here calving. We sort those out and drop in here. The sheep come in here. And then normally, depending on this past year, we started and just went this way. But this year, we'll start here, and then we'll probably come over here. And just because there's going to be a whole lot of sweet clover here. And I'm going to start hammering that as early as I can on these breaks. A lot of this up here is tame pastures where we have crested and alfalfa. So we'll let that go a little longer. But the yellow X's, those are all where you could put electric fences. They're not there, they're not permanent. The white X's are permanent. And then the yellow dog bones show where the water is placed. Anyway, we can cut those down to 20-acre pastures and quarter-mile runs on our poly wire. And that allows us to put 200,000 pounds on 20 acres for a week. So that's taking those 100 head of cows with calves and those ewes with lambs and putting them together as a mob for 2 reasons. One, we get into the non-selective grazing where they're just taking it, but those sheep are going to take a lot of those broadleafs, especially this year where we've got that sweet clover coming. And we're hitting it so hard, it's like, I think of it like a swather, where you come in, you're doing your haying in that 20 acres for a week, and then you're out, and you don't come back. Now on the tame pastures, you can circle back and take another hay crop if you wanted to apply it that way. So as we get to the virtual fence, won't that be nice not to have to run those wires? But it might make my outline a little bigger, though, I'm afraid. But at any rate, I was going to talk about when you get into these things of both multi-species animals and into collars and some of that, you want to think about what you got going, what your goals are. Look at the resources so you can be adaptive, and that adaptive management is going to be key to all this, and many of you are doing that already, and we can Q&A some of that a little bit more. But we know, for me, sweet clover is going to be everywhere. We're going to be yellow, and if you've ever been up in that country, it's not just a little yellow. There's thousands of acres yellow. So multi-species. The sheep, goats can do it. We'll offer an opportunity to target graze. And you can do that with cattle too if you put some systematic approach to it. The nice thing about it, again, trying to mimic nature and think about what nature does is you're equalizing your grazing pressures many times. If we can get in there and push that sweet clover down, for example, then that'll open the canopies up so the grass can come. And so with the collars, we're going to try this year of intensively grazing those areas and then moving off and see what the recovery is for the grass to come back so we can come in there and follow with the cows, maybe with or after. So it gives us some options. Then again, you get to stack those enterprises such that you're getting more revenue off the same amount of acres, and then getting a little better profit margin because of that. Understanding species, the cows, and Glenn kind of touched on it, they want to be down in those riparian areas. The sheep are kind of that mid species. They'll eat grass, they'll eat shrubs. They really like broadleafs, herbaceous ones. And then the goats will like those higher terrains and those woody species. And so that's a pretty accurate deal on how that all works. And knowing that, then you can think about your terrain and what you have. Also, the thing we got to think about, and we need to remind our city cousins of that, is we have this power with these animals to graze and cycle nutrients and help manage this carbon and clean the air and clean the water, and at the same time produce food and fiber. And that doesn't get touched on enough, but we really need to bring that home and remind folks that agriculture and grazing animals, and again, you gotta get up 10,000 feet, we are the solution to a lot of those ills that we get condemned for. We can clean the air, and we can clean water, and we can do it with livestock and grazing. Some other things on multi-species, as far as that regenerative impact, just having that balance of grazing and taking out invasive weeds with another grazing animal, sheep and or goats, makes a difference. Another good story to share is that you can be as effective grazing out invasive weeds and noxious weeds as you can using chemicals. And you talk to some public land resource managers, and I even know up in the forests here, you're talking $175 an acre to contract someone to go with four-wheelers or side-by-sides or backpack sprayers and squirt weeds. Well, and so how does the public perceive that, of putting these toxins into the environment? And it's not that effective because they don't access everywhere. But you can train these animals to do the same thing. And they can get up in access areas much better than humans can. So we have a story, again, going back to where we're taking undesirable plants and making food and fiber out of them. And if we let our city cousins know that, and we practice that and we believe it, I think we can go a long ways with pushing back some of those areas that, just because of their ignorance, they don't know what we can do. Other enterprises allow you that more sustainable control of your operation. I've touched on some of those others, the rough terrain and the saleable products. Making better use of your land with another stacked enterprise. So you get into all these things that you got to consider. So it's not just go home and, well, I'm going to raise sheep and I'm just going to throw them out there. There's a lot of things you've got to think about as far as your infrastructure, let alone your own knowledge and management. And so I'm not going to go into all these, but I just want you to know that, you have to consider those things when you're going to add these additional enterprises and how you're going to solve those problems. And again, adaptive to your operation, to your labor resources, to your infrastructure. And the thing to remind you, cattle or sheep or goats, if you're a sheep operation and you don't have cattle, you need cattle on there. You don't have to own them. Find somebody that wants to graze and make that deal, and vice versa. If you've got cattle and you've got spurge, you got buckbrush, or you got some invasives moving in, get somebody that's running goats or sheep to do that for you. But I'm going to tell you this, and we'll touch on it. when you tell them, if you've got somebody that's going to replace your chemical expense by grazing these invasive weeds, and you say, well, yeah, just come graze these for free. Free is not free. If you're asking me to come graze and I've got to manage those sheep, and if it's any distance, and if it's a water thing I got to consider, and a predator thing I've got to consider, then you need to look at maybe paying me to be your weed control, or working out some arrangement there. Because you're not doing me a favor by giving me free grazing necessarily, if it's going to cost me more to manage it than what I'm gaining. So we'll touch into this targeted grazing. And this was a project we did in 17 south of Fort Meade, where if you see these little guys, that's Dalmatian toadflax. And knowing some extension folks up in Montana State, they already did this study. We just wanted to replicate it. And this was in cooperation with the Bureau of Land Management to do this, because they wanted to see it too. And that's an interesting thing, is that there's a generational transition in land resource managers right now where there wasn't 10 years ago. When I was in extension, you go talk to some of them, they didn't want to put another animal out there. They did not even want to consider any of that. And now they're willing to have those discussions. I don't know what made that change, but maybe some of these activities have done it where people are looking for other solutions, other than the status quo. Anyway, like leafy spurge, toadflax has a white latex in it. It's waxy, leafed. So you're not going to get a lot of animals to eat it. And these are yearling ewes from my place. We don't have toadflax. So they would be what's called naive grazers. They don't know it. So just like you, if I brought you like Roquefort cheese, you might not enjoy it to begin with or even want to try it. So there is a training lesson to this, and there's a manual that I'll share a link to in a minute. But you've got to concentrate them enough to get them to start eating this. And here's another picture of it, and this is that link. And if you just go to sheepusa.org, they'll have this publication. And this one was done in 2006. They're currently right at this moment in revision, and the revision's just being reviewed and edited. And so that new version will be coming out, of which we even have some people in South Dakota as examples. The Perman Ranch up by Lowry, they don't have sheep, they run cattle. They got spurge and buckbrush problems. And they found a guy that could bring 1,000 head of ewes, brought the herder, set it up with them, and that sheep guy is paying them to graze that for them. Spurge and buckbrush. And then, so they're getting income from a guy that found a place to graze some sheep, and they don't have a pesticide bill. So it's a win-win on those things, especially if you know any history about spurge and what North Dakota struggled with up there. So this is where that's at. You can see all this. Again, the stalks of toadflax. You can see the other big blue and little blue and prairie sandreed, and it's on the south side of Bear Butte behind Fort Meade, and that's day 3. What's your observation? And that's something else I'm going to key on. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because like I said, I do everything by accident. You've got to observe what happened, and you probably heard some of those other speakers say it. Look at what's going on. Ask those questions. There's still toadflax everywhere. They ate everything else except that. So I'm going, well, this is a wreck. That didn't work. But you got to hang on. And we did weigh these ewes before we put them in. And then we did this 2-week deal. And we get to this point, they start sampling. And so we're training them, right? This is a training period. And by the end of a week, we could turn them into the next paddock, and they would start seeking out this stuff. And at the end of 2 weeks, we could get them in where they would take this before they take the other broadleaves, like lead plant. Yeah. So there's an addictive quality to that, like with spurge, that once you get them onto it, they'll seek it out. It'll become part of their diet. Once you've got a trained flock, then you've got something. You've got value there. Because then you can become pretty efficient about moving around and taking those. And there's a result of the regrowth after that. And that was just a little 2-week hitch on that thing with 25 ewes and a little messing around. And so we did that in June, and what we should really have done then is come back in August and done it again and hit those that recovered. But I'm busy and there's bike rally going on, some of those things. But there's opportunity for people to create businesses in that. And this is to show you that impact of a small ruminant and what it can do on our prairies out there. This is what a sweet clover year looks like in our country. This is where you don't have sheep. This is where you have sheep. In the same way here. Sheep here, you can see them. And then there's a fence line and there's cows. Don't have to own them. Young people are looking for land resources to graze. And when I was in Extension, that was a big part of what we did, was try to find those opportunities. So then you've got the landowner that has an opportunity to maybe make some money if the water and some of that stuff's in place. But look at the management you can have with that. Again, 2 wires is, we run a lot of those, and those will hold sheep in. Nothing's perfect. You do have some animals that are non-compliant, right? Cattle too. And so either you shoot the first one or you take it out of the herd so it doesn't teach the rest. But again, we're grazing like these alfalfa fields. That's another 4th cutting field. These are some of those breaks where that sweet clover had matured out. These are hair sheep, but we've got 1 wire. If you get your animals fed often enough, and you guys that string wire for cattle know that too, if they're satisfied, they're not looking because they know they're going to move soon enough. So they're just ruminating, and then you're moving before they get an attitude that they need to be looking again. And so if you get tired of stringing wire, especially as I lose my children, they go off to school, and I end up doing all this work that I had these bright ideas for, then we got to look at something else. And I've been following these collars since 2016, and they finally brought these over as a pilot last fall. It would have been in 2022. And so these ewes, we collared them, but a lot of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do wrong, so I know when I've done it right. So what do you suspect the wrong is here? Too much wool. Yeah, that's a 4.5-inch staple. Wool's not a conductor, an insulator. And trying to get those chains with that collar that went around, down in between there, you got some, but you didn't get all, so you're not getting the impact that you want. I did want to point out that, so since that pilot, they let me try them, and we see merit in them, and then I did get the World Wildlife Fund to help cost share those so we can do a 3-year project and not only practice with them, but then have land resource managers out on field days to get on the ground and look at how we're target grazing like this sweet clover will be one of those projects, and pushing it down and getting off and letting grass recover it and giving us an option to use grazing as a management tool. And so that's what we're going to do with this. So if I can play this.
With no fence, you can keep the animals within a designated area using virtual fencing. This makes it easy to give the animals access to larger, better and more varied pastures. The system consists of an app and a collar, and the two communicate over the mobile network. Our technology makes it possible to monitor your animals with the app, and you will receive notifications in case of unexpected incidents. Adjust the collar to your animal. It's important that the fit is right. A too tightly fitted collar can be unpleasant for the animal. A too loosely fitted collar will hang too low and swing exceedingly. All adult individuals in the herd must wear a collar. Young animals often follow their mother closely. It must be considered whether the animal is mature enough and have reached a suitable size before they start using no fence. From experience, they can start using no fence when they are from 4 to 6 months of age. It's easy to draw a no fence pasture in the app, giving your animals access to fresh grazing areas. Keep in mind the animal's natural behavior when you design your no fence pasture. And remember, ready access to water, good pastures and a dry place to rest. Now the animal has a collar fitted and your no fence pasture has been uploaded. Move the animal into the no fence pasture where the collar is activated. The collar communicates with the app via the mobile network and our no fence server. In the event of an escape or the delivery of an electric pulse, immediate notification will follow. The no fence collar gets its position from available satellites. Ample GPS accuracy is required for the operating mode to function. The no fence boundary is not as exact as a physical fence and should rather be considered as a zone. The satellite signals can be interrupted by buildings, large trees or steep drops. As a consequence, you should draw the boundary with some margin when creating your no fence pastures. When the animal crosses the no fence boundary, the audio warning will start. To avoid the electric pulse, the animal must turn around and return to the no fence pasture. It's easy for the animal to learn how to switch off the audio warning, as it gets an immediate response upon turning. The scale of tones lasts between 5 and 20 seconds. The audio warning makes the system predictable for the animal. In our experience, the animal must receive the electric pulse itself, or see another animal in the herd receive one in order to respect the audio warning. Should the animal ignore the audio warning and continue out of the no fence pasture, it receives an electric pulse. If the animal continues out of the grazing area, it will pass 3 warning zones before the operating mode is disabled. The app then sends a notification to inform you about the animal's escape. The collar continues to report positions, so you will always know the animal's whereabouts. In most cases, the animal will return to its herd and pasture, and the operating mode will be reactivated. No fence safeguards the welfare of the animals and contributes to sustainable agriculture.
If you Google that no fence, this is coming right off that website as an explanation on how that works. The nice things about it is it's cellular and it works with my phone. Anyway, I can build pastures. You use a satellite image, and I can build pastures where I want to target. And all you build them with is your finger. You just tap on it, and you can move that around to whatever size you want and bring your water in and some of that kind of stuff. With it being cellular, this is some of what you'll get off of it for information. And so each little dot, whether it's red, yellow, or white, is an animal. And then it'll show you, which is I like that feature. No, I can't get my... So you see that green shading in there? on that right picture, that's where they've been concentrating. And this is in a training lot. This is actually a little pen that I've just, you can see the blue area is where I've made the pasture, and I've gone way out on the south and north because there are fences there. You get these little deals where you're kind of panicked that they're out, but you're not getting a good GPS signal on some of those. So you'll get those anomalies. Same way over here in some of those. But in training, you want to set it up so that they have to run into that line somewhere. And then the other thing we've learned is, especially with sheep that is, as gregarious as wool breeds are, you've got leaders and you've got followers. So followers may never experience an electrical, the audible part, or an electric sound if they're always following. So what you want to do, and you have that option, is if you see right here or here, that's an exclusion where, let's say you had a tree that you didn't want grazed, or a cliff that you wanted to keep them from. But in this case, in the training, they're going to inadvertently run into that. So every animal will experience that. And that's a lot of what you're going to get into on this virtual fencing is you've got to learn, the sheep have got to learn, and you've got to figure out some of these things. Let's see, the reds will tell you that the batteries are running down. The yellows are telling you that it's not reporting, so you're not getting a cell signal. And they say 2 bars is good enough. And I have 2 bars at 5 feet, but I don't think I have 2 bars at a foot. Okay. So some of that, if you can see that the virtual fencing is the potential that it has, and if we look at this as being the Model T, the beginning of something that could become greater than what it is right now, is I think what we have to look at. And technology doesn't go on this linear deal, it goes like that when they discover something. So that's what I'm suspecting we're going to have. This is an area where we've mob grazed sheep and cattle together, and you can see how much we've pushed down. But anyway, the virtual fence has the potential to allow access to cropland that's not fenced, to public lands where they want to target graze areas that they don't have, let's like sheep fencing for, terrain that's not suited for fencing. So like that project that we did with the toad flax, well, if you go up into those foothills, those stakes aren't going to go in rock. So it's really going to suck trying to put those around. So it can get us into areas where we want to concentrate that grazing. And then it allows you to do that adaptive management for those areas based on environmental conditions. So if you want to keep those sheep back and work on an area and take that more intensively down and stay off of some others, you can do that. And then like I talked about, that potential to even increase custom grazing or targeting invasive areas. For example, there's a lot of history, and it still goes on. In California, they graze a lot of areas, and they've learned even more. That's even become more demand since of all the fires where they've taken livestock out of the forest and have all that understory. They want them back in there now. But I know a gal that's got a business in San Francisco. Her name's Cole Bush. And she doesn't own sheep. She rents sheep from a sheep producer. And she's got 2 herders, and they trail them along the interstate around San Francisco, and they graze open spaces. And open spaces around those cities are usually for runoff for their reservoirs for water. Well, there you go. I mean, there's opportunity if we can find it. I do know some of them that graze in those cities have more trouble with, on these electric fences, with people stealing their batteries from their energizers. So everything's got a drawback, doesn't it? These are some of those unintended consequences that come up, but the challenges that we see on the virtual fencing, be it cattle or sheep, is training that livestock, and that's key. So we found that after shearing, and we're going to shear here in February, and then those collars will go right on those ewes that we're going to use, and we'll start training them when that wool is really short. Training yourself, learning the systems, how it works, being okay with, you're going to do more work managing sheep or livestock. The cellular thing, like I brought up, that's a challenge. Yet, east of the Missouri and going where you're more densely populated areas, I can just see all kinds of opportunities for tree belts and areas that can be grazed because you got good cell service there because of the population densities. Battery life's an issue, but I think that's, again, related to the cell service in this case. And then livestock behavior, just to tell you a quick story, I know I'm running short on time. I made my pasture square because I'm just one of them white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people that, you make the box and you put the animals in there. Well, these sheep moved into a corner, and they got stuck because they keep circling. And they keep getting the audibles, and then they'd hear the neighbor get audibles, and then they were getting shocked, and they just stopped moving. And they were packed so tight you could not put another sheep in the middle of them. So it was working, but I did this. As soon as I took my finger and made the pasture a curve, that corner a curve, and they moved out of it. So you're just going to have to keep asking questions on those things. As we go down these paths of grazing, and I just see more opportunity for it, those unintended consequences like spiders come, and because of that, and again, this is nothing I sent out to do, but we've got another survey I didn't include that even has more birds. I didn't plan for birds, but because I'm mimicking nature and I'm trying to manage all that, all these other things come back. And it's just amazing. So then you start, well, I can do a little more, or I can do a little better. Or you start thinking the bigger picture. And again, every time I run into a city cousin that's telling me I'm the ruination of the world, I've got more to push back with. Pete wanted me to plug this, and I'll be speaking at it, is this Grassland Summit, which is in Ollila-Making, March 18 and 19. And if you go to SD Grass Initiative, that would be where you could hear more about this. I'll be there. There'll be a lot of other people speaking on those things. So I used up a lot of my time. Questions? I'll be around to visit later. Certainly, unintended consequences of, I soil sample every other year, every 2 years on these tame pastures to just kind of watch movement of those soils and do the infiltration test, and yeah, it's all moving the right way. Yeah, Sarah.
If there's much research on doing collars for like a percentage of the heifers, so the entire thing?
Yeah, so I think like with wool breed sheep are very gregarious. So would you have to collar the entire population? They say yes. The company says yes. I say let's try it. So what I'm going to do is I've got 150 ewe lambs or yearling ewes. I got 100 collars, so I'm going to train those 100. I'm going to take 50 out, do my 100, and then go do a pasture and then drop those 50 in to see if they'll stay with the 100. I've tried it the other way where you just do the 100 and then you leave the 50 uncollared. No, those 50 just go. So and then they leave the others out. Cattle, I think if you had the right herd, you could probably make that work, but I think we're just way too early in the understanding of what we can do, but we figure out livestock behavior.
So that concept would certainly work with mamas and babies then, right?
No. I got 2-wire fence. I can keep my ewes in. I can move through those alfalfa crested fields. I'm getting this rapid regrowth, and those little lambs will jump between those 2 wires, and they'll eat that beautiful regrowth alfalfa, and then they're about that big around. So they're going to do their own. Yeah, they'll always come back to mom, but they've got enough courage to go out beyond where you want them. So if it's a non-bloating issue, you may not have an issue.
What do you have to search for your video? On YouTube?
Which one?
The one that didn't play.
Oh, just go to no fence. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any companies or people who are using like solar panels on the collars to increase battery life and not have to change them?
Yeah, there is.
These have solar panels on them. The cattle ones are bigger, so you've got a bigger surface area. But it's, again, if, like Glenn said, heads down, how much sun are you actually getting all the time with them? And then again, you think about behavior. They're not grazing all day. They get up and they'll graze, and then they'll go sit down and ruminate, and they sit together, so are they shadowing each other? And so, there's just a lot of that we need to observe more to see what that comes to be. But, yes, sir.
So with a very small operation, just a few heads.
Yeah.
What's the smallest you do about the size of this room?
So it gives that audible, right? And they'll tell you if you go to that website that if I think it's a 15-foot buffer before, let's say that's the invisible fence, and you're 15 feet, you'll get this audible here. Okay, so that's to warn them. They should turn away. If they don't and they keep going, they're going to get shocked. So if you've got this one and that one, and then you've got this narrow lane, they're probably going to get into that. And if they move away from this one and they run into that one, then it confuses them. And that's what was happening with that too sharp a corner. Yeah. And trained animals are going to react better, much better than the ones you're training. And goats are super smart, so they'll figure out a lot. And sheep are going to be destined to repeat dumb things. So
better luck with goats.
Well, and even on these trainings, I was going to touch on that. The research will tell you if you want, when you're training sheep to eat like this toad flax, put some goats in there, and the goats will teach the sheep to eat them. But me and goats don't get along. I want to go to heaven. Some people can get along with them fine. It just, my personality doesn't fit. Jimmy.
Would you ever trust this as the perimeter fence? I mean, it seems to me like one of the biggest applications is like East River crop ground where there's no fence infrastructure, but that would just really make it hard to sleep at night having 500 sheep out there without even a hot wire around them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Time would tell. You know, we're so early in this, I don't know what to tell you other than I'm like you. If I was going to graze somebody's cornfield, let's say, I would certainly run some poly wire around the outside and create. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, the perimeter, but make it big enough to do that until I was confident that they're going to stay. But the other issue with that is, even like where we're at, if you have coyotes come in and they push them out, well, then what?
It almost seems like it's not necessarily a problem that the fence technology can catch up to and overcome some animal behavior.
Yeah, that's to be determined. But if you do, and so you think about some of those applications may not work now, but some of those where, let's say you've got a big bunch of buckbrush down in some draws, or even like little cedars that you would have some goats in to work those out. You could have them in a bigger pasture, but then concentrate them there and then move them off and just keep doing that. But if they do get pushed out, you haven't lost them.